Hello, everyone. It is Friday again at 12:30, and I'm so excited to be hosting another live session. This is quickly becoming my favorite time of the week because get to spend time with all of you and learn and share and grow together. So, if anyone can just quickly type in and confirm that my audio is working and you can all hear me, and then we'll get started. I think it should be fine. Unless some of you say that you can't hear me, let's get right into it. So today's topic is about allyship. And it's a topic really, really personal and close to my heart. Thank you, Aska, for confirming. It's a topic that's really close to my heart because it is something that sometimes is difficult for us to talk about, right? Because we are sort of like feeling that we want to be strong allies, we want to be authentic and truthful to communities that we see around us that are discriminated against or marginalized or disadvantaged in some form. And we come at it with the best of intentions. But sometimes we just don't know how, because we might be saying something that comes from a very meaningful and authentic and a really good place, but it might not be landing the same way for the same person, for the next other person, right? We may be running into blind spots. We may have unconscious biases that are playing in. And we oftentimes don't recognize those things until somebody brings it up to us. And then we feel maybe defensive, or we're like, well, I really didn't mean it that way. So why is it being treated, taken this way? So it is very, it's a very like sort of continuous push and pull, like sometimes difficult, sometimes yes, I'm making some progress kind of an approach, right? So we're going to speak about allyship and maybe talk about a few things that I have learned along the way. And I had a great a panel session that I was a part of this week, which really gave me some food for thought as well. And I thought, you know what, this is a great topic for this Friday, and let's dive right into it. And hopefully I can share some things. And please feel free to comment and share your ideas as well, so we can all learn and grow together. So I want to start off by sharing a little story about my daughter. So my daughter, who's now 20, this story happened about a year or so ago. She was 19 at the time, and she used to work at Starbucks. And she was a champion barista, really doing well. And during the COVID time, the pandemic, when there were a lot of lockdowns, so Starbucks policy was that they wouldn't have, the cart where you have all the cream and milk and sugar. So the baristas were actually putting the milk and cream and sugar for the customers themselves. So my daughter asked a customer how much cream that person would like in their coffee. And his response was, just put enough so that it matches the color of your skin. And when she told me this, I was horrified. I was like, oh my goodness, what a, just incomprehensibly offensive thing to say to somebody, right? And then I asked my daughter, what did you say? How did you reply? And she said to me, you know what, Mom? I was just sick of it. This is an everyday thing. So I just put cream in however much he wanted and gave him his coffee. And that to me was even more horrific than what actually that person had said, because it was an everyday thing, because she was tired of fighting the same battle every single day, because she was just kind of like, yeah, this happens every day. I don't want to do this today. I don't want to argue today. So I'm just going to give him his coffee because my mental health is more important. So that is, people say these things are microaggressions. People say these things are, little things that happen, sort of get over it. I'm not like this, so why should I care? I don't say these things, right? Sometimes we get defensive about certain things. And I'm just using my daughter's experience as an example, because this happens to so many different communities. I have been doing this work in the diversity, inclusion, and equity space for about a good number of years now. And every time I hear stories, even though they may be different communities and different wordings, but the barriers to inclusion, the barriers of discrimination, the barriers to just being accepted as who you are felt by people from all kinds of backgrounds and communities, right? So these are not like microaggressions or little things. They take a toll on our self-esteem. They take a toll on our sense of acceptance and sense of well-being. So as allies to different communities, and we're all allies to so many different communities, right? I'm an ally for the LGBTQ community. I'm an ally for the Black community. I'm an ally for a lot, and at least I want to be, right? So as an ally or somebody who wants to be a better ally, how can we make sure that we're on that journey in a very authentic and also effective way? And it's not always a comfortable thing. It's not always like, oh, you know what? I've done my reading. I've read a few books. I've talked to some of my friends who are from those communities, and I went out for lunch with some of my LGBTQ friends, or some of my Black friends, or some of my brown friends, and now I know everything there is to know about being a strong ally. It's not like you go to allyship school and you graduate and you're done. It's a very continuous, lifelong journey, really, of learning and of evolving and of reevaluating our own unconscious biases, our own ways of being, and just how we're seeing something is landing for the other person, evaluating our own blind spots and our own just our own landscape as well, because sometimes we may say things that are actually doing more harm than good. And I have certainly done that even as a parent. I grew up in a family, in a cultural setting that was so different than how my daughters are growing up. And with them, sometimes, like, especially when both my kids have had anxiety issues and mental health challenges. And sometimes I would say something to them, what do you have to complain about? You have everything. And my daughter, one time, she was 15, and she said, Mom, just because you have different problems or other people have different problems doesn't mean that my problems are not valid. And I realized that even though I was coming from maybe an intention of trying to motivate her or instill gratitude in her, I was actually invalidating her. And I was doing more harm than good. So sometimes, even with the best of intentions, we can actually come off as being invalidating or trying to play savior or trying to solve someone's problem when there really isn't problem, or trying to speak on their behalf when really they have all the capability and all the right to speak for themselves. So I'm going to just go over a few little pieces of nuggets, I would say, that have helped me in my journey of allyship, and some things that I've picked up along the way as well. And then we can kind of maybe hopefully spark a discussion. So feel free to send comments. I can see comments and I will respond to them accordingly, or even just share some of your thoughts on the topic. So like I said, it's a continuous journey. You don't graduate from allyship school and you're done. So you're always learning. You're always growing. You're always trying to be more effective, trying to be more understanding, trying to be more outspoken. So the number one thing is to learn, is to listen, is to not just go into activist mode right away, but more than that, learning and listening and really evaluating your own self, doing your homework. After in the past couple of years, after what happened with George Floyd, after George Floyd was tortured and murdered down in the US, we've had so many conversations around diversity, equity, inclusion. It's on top of everyone's mind. There are so many events happening all the time. There are so many keynotes and panels that I've done in the past couple of years on these topics. And a lot of times people want to jump into right away activist mode, that, oh, I'm going to fight for these people. I'm going to fight for these communities. I'm going to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. Wonderful, great. And it is absolutely necessary to do that. However, alongside that, or even before that, I would argue, it's important to first learn about those challenges. And learning is what creates empathy, because it allows us to put ourselves in the shoes of those that are marginalized. Like, even though I've faced my own barriers of discrimination, and I've certainly faced, times that I have been affected by racism or taboo or stigma or cultural shame and whatnot. But I don't quite understand, or I'm not from the LGBTQ community. So if I'm going to be an ally to that community, I need to understand what their specific issues are. I need to be able to put myself in their shoes if I'm going to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. And for that, I need to learn. I need to actually do my homework. I need to actually either read books or articles or talk to people, but not just assume that they would educate me. Actually ask for information and ask and reach out to those groups and perhaps communities that are educating us on these topics, right? So it's not just about jumping into yes, I'm going to go join the parade and I'm going to join the Pride community or ERG in my work. Great, do that, but join those things with the purpose of learning and understanding and really building that sense of empathy. So do our homework first before jumping into activist mode. It's really, really important, because what happens otherwise is that we get into this kind of like sense of savior complex. We feel like, oh yes, I'm going to use my privilege to break down the barriers, and I'm going to be a savior for this person or for this community. And that happens to all of us because we all have egos, and sometimes we don't realize how our ego is playing out, right? So sometimes we tend to unconsciously jump into this this sort of complex of feeling like a bit of a savior. So it actually, what our work becomes is less about the community or the people that we're trying to help or support, and it becomes more about us and feeling good about ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with feeling good about ourselves. Like, we all feel good about ourselves when we do things, when we do good, when we pay it forward, when we give back, etc. But that shouldn't be the main purpose. It should be like a byproduct, right? Like, the main purpose should be really to lift communities up, lift people up, and break down those systemic barriers to inclusion. So it's really important to learn. It's really important to listen. It's really important also to try not to get into the framework or the mindset of, I'm going to speak on behalf of this community now. Like, I'm an expert, I'm going to speak on their behalf. No, they are more than capable of speaking on their behalf. And this happens so many times to women, to people of color, to other marginalized groups where, oh, I'm going to save this brown person. I gave this brown person a promotion. I gave this Black person a voice. We're going to have this Black employee in our workplace. We're going to have LGBTQ representation on our board of directors. We're going to have an Indigenous person on our board table, right? We see that happening all the time. But what is the point of having the people there, just except for ticking boxes and numbers, if they are not empowered to speak up for themselves? What is the point? And it reminds me of a really, really amazing quote by Verna Myers, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard, that diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance in the party. And I try to add my own little touch, that true engagement and empowerment is feeling and being empowered that you can play your own playlist at the party. So it is so important to be able to bring our voices and to also create that space for others to bring their voices and speak for themselves and voice their concerns and voice their ideas and their insights, because that is where true diversity shines. And in order to do that, we need to step aside sometimes. In order to create that space, and we're not creating space as if like we're trying to do them a favor. That space was rightfully theirs to begin with. And it was taken away from them due to discrimination, due to racism, due to sexism, due to misogyny, due to homophobia, and all these other different barriers that people face, right? So that space was theirs to begin with. It's not like we're doing some kind of a favor to them by giving them that space or creating it for them. We're simply giving them what's rightfully theirs. We are using our privilege for better. And privilege, again, is a loaded word, right? Because sometimes people feel that privilege is bad, but we can't help having privilege. Privilege is something that we all carry in some way, shape, or form. Like, even just in my example, yes, I have faced barriers to my education, barriers in my career as a woman, as a person of color. At the same time, I do carry privilege because I'm able-bodied. I carry privilege because I was fluent in English when I arrived in this country. There are so many women that I encounter and help and try to help and mentor who are not fluent in English, and for them the barriers are even higher, or who have some kind of a disability, or who come from even like the work that some little speaking or whatever I've done in the indigenous communities. I'm always horrified as to the much higher barriers that they face. So in our little way, we always carry some privilege. So privilege is in itself is not a bad thing. It's about how we use privilege. Are we trying to hang on to our privilege because that's what makes us comfortable? Or are we actually using our privilege to break down those barriers, to make sure it's a level playing field? And there's a really great quote that I once read, that when you're used to privilege, equality feels like oppression. And that's what makes people uncomfortable, because they're used to that privilege, right? And now suddenly they see others are rising, or their privilege is being taken away from them, or if it's not being taken away, it's like the playing field is being leveled because others are being lifted up or getting more attention. And then you hear all this kind of like, oh, well, like, I can't even say stuff anymore, I can't even do this anymore, etc. Right? And when we feel uncomfortable with these conversations, there's, instead of pointing fingers at other people that, oh, this conversation is making me uncomfortable, or this person is making me uncomfortable, it's important to check within ourselves what's going on here. What's going on in our minds? Why is this conversation making us feel uncomfortable? What is it? What is that unconscious bias that we're carrying within ourselves that is making this something that we're not comfortable? Like, just because somebody else is being lifted up, it shouldn't affect our sense of well-being, unless our sense of well-being is attached to our privilege, and that's when privilege becomes a problem. So it's not about having privilege or not having privilege, that is good or bad. It's about how we use our privilege, how we recognizing and using it to lift others up. And then it can be a really empowering and meaningful experience. Next, I want to touch upon making mistakes. And when we are on a journey to allyship, on this road to allyship, we are going to make mistakes. It's not always going to be smooth sailing. Sometimes you're going to say things that may not land the right way. Sometimes some people are going to say things to us that will not land the right way, right? And when that happens, first of all, if, let's say, you've said something, I've said something to somebody that they have received in, I've said something with the best of intentions, and for them it was offensive. And in that moment, again, our egos come up. We start to get defensive. We start to feel like, oh no, I didn't mean it that way. Why isn't it being taken this way, right? But it's really important to sit back and try to understand where we went wrong. Instead of getting defensive about it or doubling down on it and thinking that, and saying that, no, I didn't mean it that way, so why should I take offense? I didn't do anything wrong. Try to put yourself in the other person's shoes and think, it's not just about how I say something. It's more importantly, it's about how the other person receives it, because it's about their experience. Like, people have said things to me, which sometimes may have been like, from their end, oh wow, I'm doing great here. I'm trying to lift this person up. But actually, to me, it's felt like that really didn't feel good. Like, there was one time I got a promotion, and a senior person in the company said, well, we gave her that promotion. Maybe they were trying to feel good about themselves that they gave me a promotion, but I earned that promotion. I worked hard for that promotion. It wasn't something that was given to me as some kind of charity, right? And that's how it landed for me. But luckily, I was able to talk to that person about it and make sure that, things were on the same page. Similarly, a friend of mine one time, there was I was denied service at a restaurant in Toronto, and this friend of mine, instead of talking to the manager, kind of like, no, I don't want to have that conversation right now because I come here a lot. And for me, that was like, this is my friend. Why are they trying to protect their own privilege instead of standing up for me? But I was able to have that conversation later on with them and clear the air, and they understood where it was coming from. So sometimes if it happens to us, it's really important to vocalize. But again, first of all, it's important to choose if you want to have this conversation with this person or not. Like coming back to that example with my daughter at Starbucks, for her, that was a random customer. She really didn't want to get into it at that day, and her mental health is more important. So it's important to pick our battles and choose our battles. Not every battle is worth fighting, and it's not our responsibility to educate others on these things, right? So our mental health comes first, and then when it's someone who's important to you or meaningful to you, and they say something, and it's something that's not necessarily coming from a bad place, but it is offensive to you, because and that's completely valid. How you feel is valid. So validate yourself. Don't just think that maybe I'm just being too sensitive, or maybe I'm just kind of being, making a big deal out of it. I should just let it go. No, your feelings are valid. So depending on who the other person is, if it's someone that you trust, and if it's someone that you know that you can have that conversation with, and it will be a learning experience for both of you, bring it up and talk about it, and do it in a setting that's respectful, and the intention should be about growth for the both of you, instead of pointing fingers or blaming. And on the flip side, if you've said something that's landed for somebody the wrong way, and I've had so many of those moments, with my daughters, with some friends, with other people, like who I've tried to be motivational, but it sort of come out as maybe sometimes even invalidating their feelings and their experience. So in that moment, it's important to reflect, not invalidate them, not try to get defensive, but reflect and understand and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to be mindful of this going forward. I'm going to do a better job. Because we're always doing the best we can until we know better, right? So give yourself that same grace. And again, learn. Making mistakes is normal, and then keep going forward. And finally, I want to touch on this idea of cultural humility. And sometimes we tend to think, I know enough about this culture, so I can speak about it, right? We never know everything about anything, ever. No matter how amazing of an expert we can get, no matter how many books and degrees we get in that topic, we never know everything. We can never truly to the point understand someone's experience until we've lived it identically, which is pretty much impossible, right? Because we are very unique human beings with unique journeys. We can never really truly understand, at a very granular level, how someone is feeling, because we are not going to ever have their identical experience. Like, I have lived through an abusive marriage. I have gone through my own barriers. I have tried to push through a lot of barriers to be where I am today. But I still don't understand everything there is about all of you, about people who are watching right now, about people that I speak in front of. So it's important to be humble. And with that humility comes the understanding that we never know all there is to know, and we're always on a learning journey. So with that humility comes the fact that I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to ask, I'm willing to seek feedback. And that is so important, because sometimes we think if I make a mistake, someone will point it to me, and then I'll reflect and I will do better. But oftentimes people are not really forthcoming, right? People are uncomfortable to share with us because they don't want to offend us, because there might be a power imbalance where they feel they can't say something to us. Like I run a nonprofit and I lead a team of volunteers, and one of my big things as a leader is to constantly seek feedback. I am always asking them, please tell me if I'm doing something that's not landing the right way, if I can improve somewhere, if I can be more empathetic, more caring, more empowering. Like, I want to create the best experience for my team. And in order to do that, I need to understand what their concerns are. So I cannot understand that, because if I'm not constantly asking for that feedback. So be humble enough to ask for feedback, because just because you know some stuff, you don't know everything. We can never know everything. And lastly, I want to wrap it up by saying that lift others up. I want to share a quick story by what that means, to illustrate that. Um, I was a number of years ago, about like 6 years ago, I was asked to apply for a seat on the board of governors, essentially the board of directors of University of Toronto, as an alumni governor. And to me, it was sort of a bit out of the blue, because I'm like, what? All the other alumni governors were middle-aged, very successful, retired white men. Not all of them were retired, but they were certainly very successful. And here I was, a 33-year-old who'd recently graduated from university, in my first job. And why was I being asked to apply on that seat? And I'm always someone who, if an opportunity knocks on my door, I will always go through it, and I will always look what's on the other side. So I did apply. I had no hope of actually getting in, but I got elected. And when I got elected, and I went into the first meeting, it was like a reception for all the incoming alumni governors. And the chair of the body that elects those governors, the chair of the body that elected me, he came up to me, and again, a white man, a Bay Street lawyer, and he said something to me that truly, truly changed for the better my entire experience at University of Toronto. He came to me and said, Samra, if you're wondering, or if there's any doubt or any thought in your head that you are here because of your gender, your age, or your skin color, I want you to please throw that out of your head. We did invite you to apply because we wanted you to apply because we wanted more diversity in our application pool. We certainly wanted to remove barriers for people when they apply. But after that, you were put through the same rigorous process and screening and multiple interviews and all of that everybody else went through. And you are here because you were shining above everybody, because you deserve it, because your passion and your dedication came through. That's why you're here. You're not here because of your gender or your skin color or your race or any of that. You're here because you deserve to be here, and your voice is needed here. And that 5-minute conversation meant the world to me, because I walked into that room that evening feeling like, am I supposed to be like everyone else? Am I supposed to act like everyone else? And after that conversation, I was like, no, I'm just supposed to be me. And since then, I've been a part of that board, and I love my time there. And now I'm the chair of a campus council, and I'm constantly trying to be authentic and raising my voice, and also making sure that I do whatever I can to break some of those barriers that others might face. So lift others up. We hear the word diversity token so much in our workplaces and in the world today, right? We hear the thing that, oh, am I here for because I'm a diversity token, or has someone hired me because of that, or sometimes we also want to just, a lot of companies are very granular about sort of the numbers that they have to meet. This many people of color, this many people with disabilities, this many people, etc. Right? So quotas. That's great. We have to do whatever we can to make sure that we are bringing in diversity into our communities and workplaces. But it's important to go beyond that. It's important to actually create the space and the voice and the comfort and the safety to empower people to raise their voices, to speak their minds, and to share their thoughts and ideas in as authentic of a way as possible. It's important to create a safe space for everyone to bring their whole selves to the table, wherever that table may be, whether it's your dinner table or whether it's your boardroom. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for engaging. Keep watching. Keep sending me topic ideas for the following weeks. I'm loving this time, and I want to keep it going and keep it continuing. Feel free to comment. Feel free to share. And feel free to connect with each other, because what I'm hoping to create from these weekly sessions is really a community of learning and sharing and growing together. Again, remember, allyship and your journey to equity is, again, a journey. It's a road, and it never ends. It's a lifelong journey. But the key is listening, learning, evaluating ourselves, and being humble enough to ask for feedback and also speak up when you see something that's not quite right around you. All right. Have a great, great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.